Hello and welcome to Offsite Dirt. Offsite Dirt is a media platform to bring our community together for offsite solutions, high performance build, panelization, supply chain, lean manufacturing, many things that fall under the umbrella of construction. We're always entertained by new building solutions, companies that are improving building systems. And so today we have Jake Staub with
Perfect.
this oh, yay, I did it right.
Perfect.
So Jake is with us. Jake is with Ripcord Engineering, and then we're literally talking about this organization that he has created called Active House USA. Jake, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I would love if you can give just a brief outline of your background, starting with the Naval Academy and then moving out of that whole industry and then where you are today in construction and building.
Okay, well, it all started with the way I had to find a way to pay for school. And so I had to go sit through an interview at my local federal representative. I don't know if anybody's visited their member of Congress, but I had to. Although I never talked to the member of Congress. I just talked to the representatives, and I talked myself into the Naval Academy. Eventually graduated from there and did a bunch of time flying airplanes off of aircraft carriers, and then convinced the Navy that would be a good idea if they sent me to test pilot school, which they did. And so I learned a little bit more about how airplanes work and how to test and evaluate them. And then I spent a bunch of years testing airplanes, in ways that normal pilots don't get to do because it's too dangerous, for lack of a better way to describe it. And eventually I decided, maybe one of the important things in this world is figure out how to make it, a little bit more energy efficient. Like, I was burning a lot of fuel. And so it dawned on me that a little change would be good. And so I got out, and with my partner, we started on the path of consulting engineering in the mechanical and plumbing fields. Generally chasing, I wouldn't say net zero stuff. I would just call it modern building practices.
I like that you call it modern building practices because I think it's a lot more than that. So let's jump in. Let's jump into Active House USA. What is it? Isn't it an alliance? How does it work?
Yeah, Active House USA is it's a national organization, so it represents the U.S. In the international body, which is Active House. So you have it's kind of a tiered thing. You have the international governing organization sits at the top, and then you have all these different national initiatives playing underneath that umbrella. Each national initiative, like the USA, it kind of fits the standard to national practice. So at the international level, it's a little bit generic, and at the national level, we kind of fit it to the local condition. Local being the size of the country. So inside of the country, of course, you got your different habits. Right now, we just have local representation on the coast. So we've got the three founders, one of which is Ripcord Engineering, who I worked for. We're on the East Coast, and then the other two founding organizations, Messana and Monterey Energy Group, they're on the West Coast. So we've got East and West on the coast. So it would be helpful to have good Midwest representation when we really get going. That's for sure.
I'm sure that's coming very soon. So you and I were kind of having this amazing conversation about passive house and about energy efficient, but this is a little bit different. How does Active House USA, how does it compare and evaluate homes and buildings?
Okay, so I guess one useful thing would be to set a reference, and the common one people know for performance is passive house. So we'll set that at one end of the scale. And I would say passive house is really focused on energy consumption. Active House, see, the way Active House got started is a company called Velux was sitting around in Europe, and they were watching this passive house movement take off. And if you pay attention to it close enough, passive house it's very stringent on the amount of window you can put in a wall to achieve the final objectives, right? And Velux, being a window manufacturer, they're looking at this and they're saying, that's not good for that's not good for us. It's not good for business. So they came up with an alternative to passive house called active house. And what active house is a little bit more human centric. So, we found over time, and the reason the founders really started this thing is because over time, what we were noticing was that none of our projects were passive house. Like, there's got to be, but we noticed that there's a trend, people being modern in the modern world, they know that they've got to do better. And we were scratching our head. We were saying, I wonder if there's something called active house. So we typed that in, boom, comes active house. And active house, it's a little bit more concerned with the views. And by views, I mean what you can see outside, through the window, and kind of what you see when you're outside the home and you're looking at the home, like how does it present? Active house is a little bit more sensitive to that. And so it designs for, we call it healthy buildings for people and planet, with the people being first, the planet being second. Not that necessarily holds in the long run. If you do well, the thing is, if you do well enough for the people, you can wrap yourself around and meet the other side of the circle or the bottom of the circle. So if the people are on the top, the planet's at the bottom. If you do well enough, you can hit the planet, and vice versa. If you're passive house and you're doing as much as you can for the planet, you can hit the people. So it's just active house is a little bit different way of doing right by the planet, but going through the people first rather than the planet first. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So when we were talking about this, active house starts with the design and the pre-construction, and how are you kind of gaining this? Can you walk us through maybe a project or an explanation of why somebody would want to consider this process for their build?
Yes. The way I look at it, active house kind of shows you how to make a comfortable user experience at the end. So when you're looking at raw performance, you can pick, just about any criteria, but let's just pick, for the sake of argument, raw energy efficiency. And if you are a raw energy efficiency type of person, what kind of car do you think you drive? Now, this is
Oh, it's
before.
definitely this is like definitely a gasoline car, right?
Oh, like raw efficiency performance. We're talking like Prius. We're talking like the light before. This is before Tesla. I guess I should,
Before it all started. Yes.
before all
Yes.
this like electric whiz bangery happened, and we've got all this really, sexy, glitzy, like Apple looking cars. Like, you would be driving like a Prius, or you would be driving like, it would be the lightest, smallest engine vehicle that you could lay your hands on, and you would be eking out like 50 miles to the gallon. But that's not how most people live. Most people, they want a little bit of comfort in their life. They want a little bit of, hey, I kind of like the way this looks. I like the way this feels. And so active house, it allows you to kind of see and dial in those characteristics that you're looking for. Hey, I want to be comfortable at the end. I want it to look pretty good. So that usually means you can correlate that with daylight. So active house looks at that. Hey, I don't want to build this really quiet interior environment and then hear a bunch of stuff banging around. Like when I'm laying there at night, active house looks at noise. And I would really like it if we didn't smell one another when we're walking around our brand new shiny house. And so active house looks at ventilation. And those are the people-centric criteria that it evaluates. And then it looks at energy. It looks at energy from 3 different areas. It looks at the amount that you're using, just the amount the building's using. And then it looks at, okay, how much are you producing with renewable means? And then it looks at, if I take the 2 and subtract the amount that I'm producing with renewables from the amount that it needs, what does that mean back at the power plant? And how, and that's the part that affects the planet. And it also looks at, like life cycle. So it examines CO2, carbon production, and it examines water consumption. Those are all
That's
the,
a lot of
it's a lot of
things to
stuff.
be
Yeah.
considered. And I love the name because you're actively taking care of the people that want to live better and be more comfortable, and then actually to resource and know these things. Because you and I were both talking, people starts, it's funny because we've got all this information out there. Yet, it's typically our architect or our design team that really kind of influences this education process. And then there's individuals like, oh, yeah, I want that. I didn't even know I could have it. So, in your perspective, how do you feel things are changing or trending? Are more people on the design side finding you? Are these your clients? Are they coming from the product suppliers? Like, how are you resourcing jobs?
Oh, I mean, I would say Active House is well suited to luxury building projects, to be honest with you. I mean, people just need a little bit more guidance on what a modern building project looks like. It's not that they don't, they know, they've picked up through the general marketing atmosphere, kind of what it is they should be doing, but they don't necessarily know how to evaluate a project for all the kind of stuff they're hearing about, if that makes sense to you. So Active House just serves as a nice way to put names to things that people are thinking about, that in ways that are they're manageable, they're definable, so you can have a something that's translatable, I guess.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It makes sense to me because, again, we were kind of talking, you and I were talking about radiant floors. Everybody wanted radiant floors. And a lot of this we were also speaking about is based on where you're living and
Yeah.
what's happening with the environment. I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about um, the steam system. You and I were talking about New
Oh.
York and we were talking about the steams. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that for our audience to understand? Because these are processes and things that are available, but not everybody understands it.
Oh, Steam. Steam's old school. You're not gonna it's gonna be a rare player that comes to you for a new building and says, I want Steam. Like, oh boy. Um, but the way the industry started, it's interesting. The industry started in the order in which HVAC is said. So it's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. The industry started with heat. So, way back when the caveman was roaming around, he was in his tent, he needed heat. And so when building, and why did he need, you could start a campfire in a tent, right? Well, they didn't have tents. They had like lodges. I don't know. They had caveman things. They needed big fires. And the reason they needed big fires is because they had a lot of the outside on the inside. And when buildings like modern buildings started, same thing. They had a lot of the outside on the inside, so they need a lot of heat. And then over time, things started tightening up. And now they didn't need so much heat anymore. They could maybe move from steam to hot water. But because the buildings were getting a little tighter, they started to get smelly inside. I mean, people started like I kid you not, the ventilation standards were designed to keep people from smelling one another. That's how it all got going. So you had heating, and then the buildings got better, and then you had ventilation, because before that, nobody really cared. And now we've gotten the buildings to a point where they're energy efficient enough that they're keeping enough of the heat inside that now we need air conditioning. So when heating, ventilation, air conditioning. And on the heating side, it went from steam. We need a shitload. Sorry, maybe that. Hopefully, this is a family, not too family friendly.
It's
Offsite.
okay.
It's
You're
an
fine.
offsite
You're
thing.
fine. It's not
Okay.
horrible. It's fine.
Okay.
Don't
Sorry.
worry about it, Jake. But we need a
Sorry.
whole bunch.
You need a lot of heat. When buildings first started, you needed a lot of heat because they had a lot of infiltration. And then over time, it went from steam, because that was a way to really punch in a lot of heat into a space, to forced hot water, which is a little bit, you don't need quite as much heat. And now we're on to heat pump heating, because we're at the point now where we can, meet the heating loads with heat pumps instead of the old steam heaters.
Right.
And
I love the whole analogy of walking us through that, because I never knew that that's kind of how it all started with the steam. And now we've kind of evolved, and we are expanding. And I think it's you're expanding it even further, and you're asking the right questions, and you're educating people, and you're saying you can live healthy, you can see healthy, we can actually use the output of people and their energy, and how that is in a relationship to how they live, right?
uh, yeah, well, so the way I approach it, and the way Active House kind of approaches it is in order to make good people on the planet, we need productive people on the planet. In order to have productive people on the planet, we need good environments for them to live in. Otherwise, what you end up, and I can tell you from experience. So one quick story about about flying airplanes off aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf in the summer is it gets hot out there, like hot. You read stories about how hot the ocean water is getting. It gets that hot in the Persian Gulf, and when that happens on a aircraft carrier, it starts to lose air conditioning. And so there were a few times where it got so hot inside that ship that nobody could sleep at night. And if you can't sleep at night, what you can't operate an aircraft safely during the day. And if you can't do that, you can't fly. So it was like a case in point where we had this national asset that the American people paid a hell of a lot of money for to stick in a place in the world to prosecute a war, and it was brought to its knees by the fact that it couldn't make air conditioning. Now, if tough guys like me, and I'm not so tough, but if tough guys like me and my bros who went through the military were incapable of carrying out our jobs during the day, and those jobs were critical to the nation, or so it said, then what chance does a person have in their homes if they can't sleep well at night to wake up and be productive during the day? Not much chance at all. So that's why, you know, it's good to have healthy, comfortable places, because ultimately, if you're looking at this from a purely capitalistic standpoint, you didn't really care about the culture at all. You just said, you know what, those people were there to grind them down to a nub. Well, you can do a whole lot more grinding if they go to sleep at night and wake up refreshed the next day, so they can pay their rent at the end of the month, than if they're stuck in a place where they can't sleep because it's so hot and uncomfortable and smelly and so on and so forth.
Well said. And I have to say, to be able to have an organization that cares about people and planet, that's such a wonderful, amazing way to direct how to build, how to design, and how to live. So, Active House USA, their goal is to create a building that looks beyond energy performance, incorporating comfort aspects such as air quality, climate, and natural light to be as accommodating as possible. And I certainly believe, Jake, that you are on your way. We really appreciate having the time with you on Offsite Dirt, exploring a little bit more about better building practices and organizations like yourself, Active House USA, making that foot, moving our feet forward into a place that is designed and built for better living. And because of that, better building practices are becoming more aware by your organization and by those that are interested in it. Thank you so much for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having us. And go Active House. Go Active House.
That's right. Go Active
Right.
House. Have a great day. If you need more information, make sure you check out the show notes. Jake is available. We'll make sure to connect you through LinkedIn, and we look forward for you to be more active about your next project. Have a great day, and that's the Dirt on Offsite Dirt.